We're watching out for a monster system to move into the western and central United States in the middle and end of next week to bring in extremely cold and winter type precipitation as well temperatures, as well bringing in obviously extremely rare type snowfall totals across the western Rockies and portions of the Four Corner states, as well watching out for a very significant and as well pretty large setup for severe weather across the plains as we get towards the middle of next week here with a very strong negative tilted trough, already a 50% for day 5 and a 50% for day 7. Both without further ado, let's get in the video. So let's now get a look here at the actual pattern we are watching out here. Obviously, we're going to be watching out for two significant, or I wouldn't say significant, both of them, but obviously one extremely significant and very rare type pattern. Significant, obviously, meridional low jet coming in basically from the deep southwest and then ejecting into the central United States and portions of obviously the central plain specifically, kind of near obviously the traditional tornado alley areas where it's going to be ejecting here on October 13th. But obviously, it's going to be a negative tilted, very strong trough ejecting, which will be coming from the southwest and then ejecting, obviously, like I said, on October 13th into portions of the plains. So we're going to be watching out for both extremely significant winter conditions on the western side of this trough, and then, of course, severe weather threats basically right on the edge of this trough with this from the same setup. So we're going to be watching out for two significant events just from this one trough, which is why it's such a really rare pattern because this is typically not something we'd see in October, and I'll be showing you guys what I mean by that later on. But here's a look at 500 millibar height. So we have a very small negative tilted trough, which will move into October 10th. This is going to be the first weaker trough, and we do already obviously have a 50% highlighted for day 5 because of this. On October 11th, we do have a small minor, or not want to say a minor, but we are watching out the monitoring severe weather threats across Tornado Alley, across the plains, including Oklahoma, Texas, and portions of southern Kansas, where we have a 15% highlight. I actually believe even towards kind of closer to the Ozarks, I believe, is where that 50% is actually located. It's going to be a decent trough. Obviously, it's not going to be as strong as this one right here. Obviously, this is the big trough, which will be entering the United States by basically later October 11th. But there's that first trough. Going to watch out already at 15% on day 5. So basically, already slight risk. So definitely something to keep a close eye on. But obviously, the main day I'm really watching out for is going to be October 12th and the 13th, because that's when we see that main and very, very strong negative tilted trough basically come in from the southwest United States. I mean, look at this. This is just absolutely mental. I mean, this is typically not something whatsoever we see at all in really October. Typically, it kind of just be like this kind of across the northern Rockies. If we have anything really negative tilted at really if anything strong at this negative tilt, it's in October, it's going to be basically in the North Rockies and not all the way down in the Southwest. I mean, this is a definitely very, very rare pattern, and we typically don't see something like this severe weather-wise until May, and we don't see anything like this storm-wise or snowstorm-wise basically until the early spring time frame, where you see those blizzards across Nebraska, Kansas, South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, to basically really March and April. So this is a very, very complex system. Both severe weather and the winter storm part of this event is definitely not usual, or I would say common at this time of the year. But this is a very strong trough, as well, a very strong low pressure associated with it, I believe, at like 984 millibars. So we're going to be watching out for some significant severe weather, obviously, and very heavy, and as well potential blizzard conditions. I mean, we could very well see a blizzard with this snowstorm due to the fact that there's going to be really, really strong winds wrapping around this low pressure. So there's going to be something to watch out for, both extreme winter conditions, and then as well kind of spring and basically spring and early summer setup there across the plains. It's going to be a very complex system, definitely a very weird setup for both of these sides of the event, both sides event wise of this trough. Again, really strong negative tilted trough with a meridional flow, so it's going to be kind of not going to be the fastest moving system, so that's why this snow will most likely accumulate at a very fast and over a gradual rate, as well watching out for the flooding threat as a result of it kind of being a little bit slower mover compared to our zonal flow. But again, there's that huge system. I mean, this is just giving me the bone chills based on this. I mean, we're going to be seeing very unseasonably cold temperatures, and it's going to allow for this ridge to strengthen toward the east. We're going to be seeing some kind of early fall type weather across the east of the Mississippi River, basically, with some pretty warm temperatures as well, some pretty humid conditions. Obviously, the temperatures are going to be really changed on the pattern we have now. Obviously, with very stubborn high pressure in the Dakotas and north central plains right now, bringing basically summer type temperatures. But with that first trough moving in October 9th, we're going to start seeing a significant cool down across the western United States. Still going to be very warm as a result of that strengthening ridge. You're going to be seeing 18 to 20 plus degrees above average across the plains, and then seeing anywhere from less than 30 degrees below average across portions of the southwest. So we're talking about unseasonably cold temperatures. And obviously, this first trough is going to be really rather weak, but in that second trough, it's going to be absolutely crazy. I mean, look at this. October 12th, going to be start seeing already 40 degrees. Look at that, 40 degrees below average. It's basically saying, let's say your average high in Salt Lake, or let's say average high in central Nevada at this time of the year. I don't know exactly what it is. But let's say it's 70. That could be completely off, but let's say it's 70. That's basically saying the high is 30 that day. That's how big of a that's how big 40 degrees is. Let's also say your average is 40 degrees as a high somewhere. That means the high will be 0 degrees. I mean, that's a huge difference. I mean, look at the difference between 80 and 40 degrees. I mean, that's a huge difference that we're seeing 40 degrees below average across the deep west. And obviously going to be seeing a very warm and kind of a more fall-like approach across portions of the eastern United States. And it's going to continue this really cold weather. Going to get 40.2 degrees below average across portions of Arizona. I mean, like I said, this is going to be going really far south. I mean, typically if we see anything at this type of severity, it's just within the northern Rockies, and that's why those storms in October typically kind of stay within this general area right here. But this is when it's going all the way down into like Flagstaff and portions of northern New Mexico. So it's a really weird setup. It actually kind of reminds me of that blizzard. Blizzard was I believe it was Bob last year of October 2020. I believe that was also officially a blizzard, and it went all the way down towards the Texas Panhandle. But obviously, this type of cold is actually this trough. It's a lot more significant than October 2020, because obviously this will bring in now a really significant dry line. It's going to as well really increase the threat for severe weather with this really extreme amount of shear and really good kinematics. But the temperature's going to be basically splitting, basically going from really warm kind of late or early fall temperatures to basically winter temperatures. We're basically going just going to be a dramatic difference, as well as going to be a very significant snowstorm. It has potential to possibly be a blizzard. But here's the overall look now, October 13th. There you see again, going to be seeing a really defined front here with colder in the back end of the system. So we're going to be seeing as well on the severe weather side, we are going to be seeing a good amount of instability and as well a pretty decent warm sector. So as well, again, going to be seeing conducive temperatures and conducive dew points as a result of this overall pretty strong high towards the northeast and that really strong cold front towards the west. We're going to be seeing a good amount of instability and just a kind of weird looking setup considering it's October. I mean, this type of setup would be something really good for like maybe, I'd say maybe May, considering it's kind of traditional tornado alley. I mean, this is just, like I said, a really weird setup. Going to be seeing, again, a few degrees, maybe 12 to 14 degrees above average across the main area of severe weather for this setup. So we're going to be seeing some pretty good temperatures into the 70s and 80s, as well dew points going pretty far high into the 60s as far north as like Iowa and Nebraska, which is not too common at all in October. So this whole setup, this whole everything is very off. Like the temperatures, how well below average they are. This trough setup is just really weird. The severe weather part of this is really weird. The obviously snowstorm part of this is really weird. I mean, everything about this whole setup is very rare, very weird, and just uncommon setup. It's going to be set in place, which is why it's really just catching my attention, really. Something else that's catching my attention is the severe weather side of this. Of course, we do have, I believe this is the first time since obviously since data for a outlooks began in 2005. I believe this is the first time ever that a day 7 SPC outlook during the August and December, between August and December, included a shaded area. So this is actually the first time. Obviously, because we look at day 7, there is a probability for day 7. This is the 50% for day 7, and we have another 50% for day 5. So we actually have two risked in October, which is just absolutely uncommon. I mean, even having a 15% in all the way to day 7 is extremely uncommon. The fact we have it in October is just stating that we are watching out for a very uncommon type setup, and it's looking pretty significant. So again, the data for ALX began in 2005, and this is the first time a day 7 SBC outlook has ever been highlighted between August and December. So that has a lot to say. Obviously, this is the first time ever, which is obviously, let's see, 2005, which was obviously, 2005 was obviously what, let's see here, 2005 was 16 years ago, something like that. So 16 years, the first time we've had a 50% in day 7 between this time frame. So here's all the day 7, obviously not day 5, day 7. But here's like the day 5 probability. So we have 15% chance, like I said, into the Ozark region, southern Kansas, much of central and eastern Oklahoma, portion of northeast Texas, and also portions of western Arkansas and southwest Missouri. So including much of the Ozarks there. So we have 15%, obviously, which will highlight a slight risk. This includes around 6.6 million people. Again, obviously, this slight worthy risk will obviously expand as we get closer to day 1. So we're going to definitely include a large population for this, as it includes Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Plano, Garland, and Carrollton. So just look at the overall description here for day 4. Obviously, to day 4 to Monday, day 6. So obviously on Saturday, an upper level ridge is forecasted to move eastward, obviously, and that will be towards kind of the Quebec region, like we saw in the 500 millibar across the eastern U.S. and southeast mid-level flow becomes established in the south central states. An upper level trough is forecasted to move northeastward across the northern plains on Saturday. The model suggests that some instability will develop by the afternoon. Again, this is for the 10th, which will be, I believe, Sunday. But obviously, it's going to set up as early as Saturday. The model suggests that some instability will develop by the afternoon from eastern parts of the Dakotas eastward into the upper Mississippi Valley. Scattered thunderstorms should be obviously form ahead. Of the upper level trough, storms can develop in the areas destabilized. The most should have a severe threats during the late afternoon and evening. However, some uncertainty exists concerning the amount of instability that will develop. For this reason, we will not add an area at this time. But obviously, from Saturday to Sunday, we have obviously a highlight basically. So this is obviously basically valid from Sunday to Monday. So obviously into Sunday, we have a fast-moving upper-level trough. Will likely move across the southwestern United States. Obviously, we're seeing some pretty good moisture as well. Strong moisture advection is forecasted across the southern and central states, where surface dew points will rise into the lower and mid-60s, which is actually not too shabby considering it's October. In response, a narrow corridor of moderate instability could be in place by early evening from parts of north central Texas across Oklahoma into southern Kansas. So we're going to be seeing a pretty good amount of instability, deep layer shear, as well. Going to be seeing as well potential chance for some scattered supercells, surface-based supercells with large hail, and an environment should support supercells with isolated large hail, wind damage, and as well a conditional tornado threat. However, again, it's kind of the kinematics aren't as good with this setup, and the warm sector is pretty thin compared to the October 13th event. But let's now go to day 7, which is a big one we're watching out for. It's going to be valid from the 12th toward the 13th. So this one actually includes even more people, and it's actually further eastward because of this whole setup. Obviously, the dry line would kind of be right here. So the setup's going to be pushing a little bit further westward compared towards day 5. So 50% now, still including very similar areas, just further east or further west. We're still including now south central Kansas, just basically much of western and central Oklahoma, and portions of north central Texas, including Fort Worth, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, Arlington, and Wichita. So actually included the DFW area as well, and 7.8 million people. Let's go all the way down to day 7. An upper level trough is forecasted to move eastward across the southwest United States. Ahead of this trough, low-level moisture will likely advect northward across the southern and central plains. In response, a corridor of moderate instability is forecasted to develop in parts of the southern and central plains by late Tuesday afternoon. However, the spread is large on the timing of the upper-level trough, with the European much lower than the GFS solution. Deep layer shear should strengthen as the system approaches the southern plains. The instability should make conditions favorable for severe storms across parts of the southern central plains Tuesday afternoon and evening. Will add a severe threat for Tuesday to account for this scenario. So again, we are watching out for a pretty significant day here on specifically day 7. So let's start now looking at the severe weather setup. So let's now look at the overall 500 millibar wind speed here. So obviously there's that first kind of more zonal type flow, obviously on the 10th into the 11th. So there's a negative tilted, very weak negative tilted trough. Basically, there it is, ejecting into obviously much of the plains there with some decent amount of shear up to around 50-ish knots or so in the 500 millibar 500 millibar level, obviously kind of into the middle atmosphere basically. And as we continue on, we're going to be seeing some decent amounts here continuing to develop as we get now towards the overnight hours. We're going to be seeing now as high as around 60 knots. So, again, we'll be seeing some considerable decent kinematics. So, we're going to be seeing some pretty good shear to most likely just allow for and conduce the development of some supercells. So as we're going to watch out for some pretty good, actually some decent thermos. So we're going to watch out as well for the possibility for some significant hail. But let's not go into the main event here. Look at this, considerably a lot stronger than the first trough, obviously. I mean, look at this already. I mean, we're already seeing 112 knots of shear just at 500 millibars. And when you see shear this strong at 500 millibars, it is extremely uncommon at this time of the year. I mean, maybe 900, maybe let's say 850 millibars would be common, but 500 millibars, this is definitely not common for an October setup whatsoever. I mean, you see they're really strong flow in the south, some really strong and very obviously fluent southwesterly flow, obviously coming from the southwest all the way up into ejecting into the plains. And look at this is absolutely crazy setup. I mean, we're talking about 120-ish knots there. There's that really strong low pressure with the really strong, obviously, meridional and amped meridional flow. So of course going to watch out for some really significant winds with this event, most likely as well, if the thermos and kinematics obviously come together, as well. Going to be watching out for even a tornado threat with the system as well. But with the hail, it's obviously, I think the hail is going to be a lot hard to kind of grasp on as of now. The GFS and European aren't showing the best thermos to kind of sustain a significant hail threat, but we're going to obviously continue to watch out as we monitor this closely. But a lot of shear, obviously, talking. I mean, look at this, 90 knots at 500 millibars into Kansas, Oklahoma, into Texas, as well. Going to get as high as 60 knots. So really monstrous and absolutely mental kinematics with this event at 500 millibars. Let's now look at, let's see what we have at 700 millibars. And look at this. Let's now go back to the 13th. I mean, look at this thing, 75 knots at 700 millibars. I mean, that is just absolutely crazy. And that 850 millibars, going to be seeing here closer to the surface, going to be seeing shear values at around, let's see here, 60 knots at around 70 knots. So extremely favorable kinematics with a lot of support from the mid levels, upper levels, and lower levels. So watching out for some really good, some probably going to be seeing a lot of elongated photographs, obviously, as we look in the far out and long range with the GFS and European. So definitely watching out, obviously, for a very significant event. So let's now take a better look at the overall severe weather setup for the eastern plains, basically, or more like the south central plains, basically, Oklahoma, Kansas, portions of Missouri, Arkansas, and Texas, obviously, with both days combined, the 10th and the 11th. So obviously the 10th, we're going to be seeing a decent, actually, a pretty decent warm sector with I'd say a lot more moisture than what we're seeing with the 13th. So we're going to be seeing better thermos overall with the 11th, or yeah, with the 11th, I'd say we'd probably be seeing, or more like the 10th into the overnight hours, or the afternoon and evening hours. I'd say we'll probably see a better hail risk based on the better thermos, because obviously the hail is a big factor, and is obviously changed, or not changed, but it obviously differs with the thermos a lot more than obviously the kinematics. Obviously with the hail, you obviously have to have a certain like kind of general vicinity temperature wise, and obviously dew point wise, and that's exactly what we're going to be seeing here with the 11th. We're going to be seeing dew points into basically around the high 60s and low 70s across Texas and Oklahoma. So we're going to be seeing a pretty decent warm sector here again. We're going to be seeing all right kinematics with the kind of highest kinematics kind of staying here basically kind of just in north of the main event. So the kinematics will be all right, which is why we're not seeing huge like kind of amped up kind of discussion about it, like the 13th. But I mean, not looking too shabby whatsoever, especially into the overnight hours as we get now towards basically into basically what 3Z looking alright, and as well by 60. At that point, it would most likely just be kind of more of a linear mode as this storm kind of just gust out. But there you see. There's that strong low jet, basically. There you see that really dry air, basically following it. There's that low jet dipping in October 12th. I should probably maybe use a black instead. But yeah, there you see that little jet basically dipping in from obviously the Pacific Northwest down to the deep Southwest. I mean, look at that. We're going to be seeing a very, and I say very intense dry line setup with how significant this cold front is. I mean, there's that really significant low jet basically dipping like that. And there's that really cold and dry air, and there we'll be seeing a decent amount of moisture. Obviously, a lot of advection kind of going on here. So we're gonna be seeing a lot of kind of moisture advection kind of jumping in from the Gulf of Mexico, and we're gonna be seeing a very thin, but as well more of a expansive warm sector across, obviously all the way from Kansas down to Texas. We're gonna be seeing around 69-degree dew points. And then as we go all the way up into the mid 60s, all the way up as far north as Kansas, and even into the as well mid 60s into even Nebraska. So actually, these are not too shabby of thermos whatsoever, considering it's October. But again, that's kind of more towards the morning hours. But as we now go to the afternoon hours, the dew points will obviously decrease as obviously the humidity is obviously going to decrease as well. But still, like I said, a very thin warm sector, kind of specifically centered across a specific area. So it's going to be a lot thinner of a warm sector, but a lot more kinemax support. The thermo support is a little bit less. Still seeing obviously some good thermos, getting the upper 60s, but not as widespread. And as we get towards around 0Z and around 3Z, we're going to be seeing some thermos basically sitting into the lower 60s. But so a really, really intense drying and then really amp the amount of instability there, and a lot, just overall, allow for some supercells to develop. But they're most likely to be surface based for a little bit. But as this storm, or as this meridional flow continues to obviously strengthen, it's going to as well most likely gust a storm out and most likely just become a really strong squall line overnight threat. But the kinematic, or now look at the theta E temperature for this event. Let's now get towards October 13th into this is now 18Z. Seeing a decent amount of instability there. 342 Kelvin, 347. It's not looking too shabby. Again, this is October we're talking about, and as we now get towards, let's see here, 21Z, and then by 0Z, we're going to be seeing some lower numbers, but still seeing all right, moderate instability is the best way to put it, like the National Hurricane Center said. But I mean, it's definitely all right, and it's definitely not the worst. And let's now look at the overall surface-based cape as well. So it's pretty important here. Pretty important part of the setup, as the amount of cape will obviously determine basically the events itself. But let's now look at the cape values here. So as we now get towards October 13th, this is a look at 18Z, seeing actually not too shabby values here, but of course the GFS tends to really bum out and really underestimate cape values when it comes to the long term, but still seeing let's see cape values into around 1,000. But if we actually go to the actual sounding themselves, let's actually now go back towards the surface and go back to let's go back to the dew point temperatures. We go back, we actually look at the actual soundings themselves. You're gonna be seeing a lot better. Let's see, let's actually test this out. If we're gonna be seeing better cape values. And of course, watching out for the GFS now, obviously uptrending on both the snow and as well as severe weather threat. So here's the 11th and basically the 10th into the 11th overnight. Going to be seeing as well that severe weather, specifically more toward the east compared to the 13th. Can be seeing that severe weather across the Ozarks and portions all the way to the northeast Texas. Gonna definitely watch out for the possibility of some overall significant severe weather then. And obviously there you see the snow showers starting to become more widespread across the Rockies as this brutal cold front continues to advance. And then we see really strong low pressure at 987 millibars. Going to be seeing really, really high and really heavy precipitation going on here. So you're going to be seeing as well really significant and really strong wind along this low pressure with very heavy precipitated snowfall, as well with developing severe weather threat kind of starting to emerge and boil in the south central and the overall plain. So there's going to be the main area of watching out for severe weather. This is going to be around obviously around 2 o'clock in the early afternoon hours, but at this point the main event will kind of develop towards the evening hours. But still seeing a really weird type conveyor belt system with a lot of that snow near the cold conveyor belt with the warm conveyor belt obviously kind of going upward like this. But yeah, going to be seeing some pretty significant snowfall. Of course, going to get a really extremely rare type totals across portions of the Northwest. I mean, we're actually seeing Billings is actually right here at around 42 inches, and actually they average around 4 feet of snow, so they may get almost more than 70% of their average in yearly average snowfall just within one snowstorm. We're talking about a very rare type snowstorm for October. I mean, up to nearly 5 feet of snow is absolutely mental because they have 65 inches. So definitely watching out for a very significant week ahead.